How are
Thank you.
you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for speaking to me. The costumes are amazing. The
Hey.
wigs are amazing. The nails, everything. So I wanted to dive into this. How much do you feel? Well, you have the research process of it, but I wanted to know about more of the cultural impact of the looks and the styles within the 90s, especially when we come to 95. How much did that play a role as opposed to, yes, you have the research, but though that cultural moment, those small pockets that different communities were doing. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, 95 was so pivotal. I mean, it was just such a huge time in hip hop, such a huge time in the culture. Yeah, I think that what was important was getting all those brands for me that were important during those times. And I feel like me and the team did pretty great at getting that and pulling that across, and then dealing with the Source Awards and like recreating all those characters within those looks really kind of like brought it home.
I also wanted to talk about kind of the evolutionary style of Lucille. We first met her, she's covered up, the church mouse girl. Then it was a little bit more of a skin reveal, just a little bit more. And then now we're at the fur coat, the more expensive look of things. Can you talk about her evolution and finding kind of the right costumes that will fit her openness?
Oh, I love these questions. So yes, Lucille, being, sort of covered up, being wanting to be seen in a certain light, right? Wanting to be a church woman, a God fearing woman, a mother, and then beginning to feel like she wasn't being seen. And so she starts to show a little bit more skin and starts to say, hey, I am here. Um, and then her kind of like, I feel like she's seesawing a little bit when it comes to like, being in the church, but also still being the woman she wants to be. So I think it's been an interesting juxtapose, and it's been an interesting play with her. Um, her as Lucille, and knowing what the real Lucille, who I get to talk to time, would do and wouldn't do, and then knowing what the actress, understands about the character, because it's a true collaboration. Um, the evolution has been a whole lot of fun. Even like seeing like Lucille like start to wear more designer stuff. Like not only does she have like fur coat, but she also, is starting to accept a little bit of the money and like have a Prada bag, have a Fendi bag. Like it's very like subtle, like unless like I didn't make it so that it's like in the forefront, like you can really tell what these brands are. But if you are into fashion and you know what was going on in that time, then you can pinpoint those little Easter eggs.
Right. How much do you feel there's a balance between the characters dressing for comfortability as opposed to what's happening in the culture? Or, you have to have this kind of jacket or this kind of pants.
For me, it's a lot less about comfort. It's more about like the action of what you're doing throughout that day. Because sometimes they're in outfits for a long period of time, but they could be getting into a fight later on that day. They could be, so I'm thinking about what the look should be for the scene and for the time, and what they would actually wear. But I also have to keep in mind what is happening throughout the course of the day.
Right. And also it deals with strippers and strip clubs. I was wondering how much of that kind of goes into what was, your yes, it's just lingerie, but how much thought process goes into creating kind of each stripper look?
Oh yeah, again, we do a lot of research, and then we have Toy Map, who was helping us with those sort of scenes, because she was around during those times, rolling with BMF since the beginning and rolling with Meech since she was 15. So she kind of knew all the ins and outs, and we had like other representatives there to help us, consultants, to make sure that we got everything right. But also my team, like, and myself, like shopping into it, trying to figure out the best the best lingerie, non-lingerie looks, because,
Mhm.
in those scenes and in Atlanta in those times, the strippers were nude. So, and they wore garter versus like, throwing money in the beginning. And, so those kind of like little details were important. And we had to, like, if you weren't on the pole and you were on the floor, you may have had lingerie on.
Right. I want to talk also about the wigs, the looks and of the wigs and the hair. Can you talk about, is it costume first and how it matches with the wig? Is it vice versa? How does that
So I usually get to do my fittings first.
look?
And then I sort of put together 5 or 6, sometimes 10 options, because I can't choose.
Right.
And, knowing that I have to make sure that it stays within the color palette, stays within, the set, all the things. And then I get it over to the director and the showrunner, and we decide what the final choice is going to be. Once the final choice is made, then I share it with hair and makeup, and then we talk about what's going to go with that.
Right. How much do you feel also the clothes represents more of a personality, also includes the economic budget? For example, B. Mickey, he's struggling right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he can't say wear these pants or Prada, this and other clothing. How much do you feel that that kind of impacts the character's look?
Oh, that's so important to me. I think authenticity is the pinnacle of costume design. I think, like, if it doesn't look real, it doesn't look right.
Mhm.
So B Mickey struggling and wearing his polo shirt, like no brand polo shirts, and wearing, the thing about the one thing that we talked about a lot on the show, and is a cultural thing, is that we don't look like what we're going through, right? So we always sort of stay together, stay clean. So it was about like balancing that as well. Like he still may have a polo shirt, but he may wear it more than one time, or he's just always going to stay clean. He just doesn't have what Meech and Terry and Hoop have. He's just not on their level. And being able to um make those differences between the characters is very important to me. So, you asking that question and noticing that is like a
Mhm.
big deal.
Also, how much of the research process that went into the different regions that we're in, also including Mexico, and we do see the cartel, it's more of that looser fitting linen style as opposed to other regions.
Yeah. So I'll start with Mexico. With Mexico, the idea behind their looks there was that they were getting clothes along the way. So needing them to feel like they came from the places that they were, or that they were ill-fitting because they were not their clothes, was the point behind all of that. The textures, the colors, played a big part in that. As far as like St. Louis versus Detroit versus Atlanta, in terms of the research, we had extensive research for each place. Knowing that like St. Louis is a little bit behind even Detroit, um, we had to play into that. So sometimes some of the brands that they may have worn in season 3 even, we might have carried over a little bit into season 4 for St. Louis.
Right.
And just like offbeat brands, just like, in New York, you would wear something different than you would in Detroit, but sometimes they crossed over.
Do you feel also that setting, not so much the city itself, but the setting of we're in a car dealership or we're now in a bank dictates that character's look?
So when it came to going to certain places for meetings,
Mhm.
for Meech specifically,
Right.
I would try to keep him a little bit more polished, unless it was a meeting of, like, if he was going to go meet, like, say, another big time drug dealer. I would try to make sure that he was a little bit more polished. Now, if it's just a daily meeting, to not look suspicious, I would keep him kind of casual.
Right. So when you got touch upon like real life actual events, for example, the Source Awards, is it more of matching identically of what they was wearing, or is more of that feeling of where they came from?
So it's always my goal to make sure to try to match it identically.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that come into play there. You know, there might be a clearance issue in terms of being able to use certain logos or certain brands. But my goal is to try to get it to look as authentic as possible. But I'm very happy if the essence is there.
Right. Do you operate more of individual scenes, or is it we get the entire script and this is the journey of the clothes?
I get the entire script. Sometimes I get maybe 6 or 7 at a time. So I'm able to prep way ahead of time. You know, I begin to think about, you know, I can connect a song that's in the script, that's written into the script, to the exact time that it should be, like the little, like pulling out the little things that give us references to complete the story, to find all the clothes. And so like when I get the script, I break it down. I read through it, break it down one time, go back through, break it down another time. And then I put it into the computer to let the computer help me break it down, just to make sure that the days match up and everything is good. Um, and then, you know, then I'm able to like sort of like tell the whole story. Like I have to like go into telling the whole story. Like, what would he have done when he left the store and went home? Would he have changed before he went out that night? Like I have to think about like all the things that make it look like a real full day.
Right. How do you feel that working on BMF has kind of changed or impacted you as a costume designer?
Oh wow. I think working on a show that is a period piece has been a nice journey for me as a costume designer. It like made me a more well-rounded costume designer, knowing that I could do it, but just being able to do it, right? Being able to tell stories that I'm familiar with, through clothing, you know, being able to like show my range, being able to show how I tell stories about color, because a lot of times like when I'm designing stuff, like I design a lot with emotion, right? So I may choose a color for a character for that day because I want him in blue. I want him to seem serene and calm, and you know that's what's coming off the page. So you know, a lot of times like I'm able to like tell a story through the clothing in that way, and this show has made it an even broader spectrum of my talents, is what I would say.
Thank you so much for speaking to me. Wonderful job. I love the looks. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Nice to meet you.